How many of you are gardeners? What do you grow? Vegetables. Squash? Pumpkin. Flowers. Roses. You have to come see my 60 rose bushes. Who else? Fruit trees. When did you start becoming a gardener? How young were you? How old were you? Just recently. Some of you are getting into it a little bit late. Did any of you, when you were a little kid in first or second grade, you had that styrofoam cup with the soil in it, and you planted a seed and you waited patiently for it to show up, and it never showed up? Like, oh, this is the pits. But that doesn't happen to you anymore, right? Which is more important, the seed or the soil? You gotta have both. You know, deep in the remote frozen tundra of Norway, about 800 miles from the North Pole, there is this guarded facility that's deep about 420 feet inside of a mountain. Now, the items that are stored in this are stored in individual rooms at 0 degrees. And they're all kept under a coated, air-locked, vaulted door. And often the mountain itself is covered with 10 feet of soil, and 10 feet of snow, and if that doesn't get to you, the polar bears that roam on the outside guard this monstrous facility. And you got to know that polar bears and their babies, male polar bears get to be 1,500 pounds, and they're known for attacking human beings and then eating them, not like the brown bears in Alaska. So they're natural guards that they have up there. So if you choose to go up and visit this place and you survive the snow and the bears, and you can get the keys inside the vault, you can walk into this incredible place. Now, this place also has a backup system to be sure that everything that's stored in there is kept at 0 degrees, and they estimate that even if there was a major catastrophe, like a weather issue or a worldwide war, heaven forbid, but if there was a major catastrophe, even with the systems, the backup systems, etc., that they have, and even if they lost electricity, the items in there would still be able to stay cold for 200 years. I mean, this is an incredible system that they have, even with that power failure. So once you get inside that vault, you would think that there was really something pretty special inside that vault, because countries from all over the world have helped make this huge vault happen. They've spent multi-million dollars creating it. And it's not about UFOs, it's not about studying precious metals or storing precious metals away. It isn't about protecting a time machine. What they have spent so much money on and come together on to store in those vaults located 430 feet inside of that mountain are over 6 million seeds from all over the world. 6 million seeds to protect that they never ever want to lose. Now we know just recently one of the things that transpired was they were doing some excavation of pyramids in Egypt, and they came across a burial site within one of the pyramids, and they found seeds that were over 2,000 years old. And they were able to take those seeds and plant them, and they actually grew. So you might be thinking at this point that seeds are probably the most important part about growing. Well, let's take a look at the soil, because that's important to our growth process too. In Matthew 13, 3 through 8, Jesus tells the story of the sower and the soil. And he spoke many things to them in parable and said, "Behold, a sower went out to sow. And when he had sown some, and seed fell on the roadside, and the fowl came and they ate it. Other seeds fell upon the rock where there was not sufficient soil, and it sprang up early because the ground was not deep enough. But when the sun shone, it was scorched, and because it had not rooted, it dried up. And other seed fell among thistle, and the thistle sprang up and choked it. And other seed fell in good soil and bore fruit, some 100-fold, some 60, and others 30. William Barclay writes about the kinds of soil that were listed in this parable. First was the common ground. Now, you have to understand that in Palestine at that time, there were actually right-of-way passages that were about 3 feet wide. And these were common passages, and people would walk on them to get from point A to point B. But because they were common ground and nobody owned them, you could cultivate them and plant if you chose to. However, because they had been walked on so many times, they were like concrete. The ground was packed down in. So if seed were thrown on them, they couldn't possibly grow because they couldn't get down within the soil. Now, the second one was the rocky ground. And what you need to know about Palestine is just below the surface, a lot of places, is a limestone. And so that limestone was so thin and it had no depth, so that even if the seeds were able to penetrate the soil, there was nothing there to hold the nutrients like the rain to help those plant seeds grow. And next came the thorny ground. Now, maybe you've heard the saying, 1 year's seeds make 7 years' weeds. That's true in my yard. But if the seeds of the weeds remain in the soil, they ultimately move out and destroy the plants that are there because they crowd them out. Last but not least was the good ground. And this healthy soil received the seed and gave it depth in order to allow roots to grow. Because of the depth, it was able to absorb nourishment, and the results with the nourishment, it got the nourishment that it needed. It gave the seeds the opportunity to grow. So maybe you're a little confused at this point. Is the seed more important, or is the soil more important? Or is it vice versa? Let's take a look at what Ernest Holmes, in his universal chart or the metaphysical chart or the creative process chart, whichever you should choose to call it, has to say about it. Now, I know some of you are quite familiar with that chart because you've taken Science of Mind classes, and some of you may not be. So let's take a look at it. Is it up? Yep, it's up. Good. You'll notice that there are 3 different sections to the chart. And the top one is spirit, the middle one is soul, and the bottom one is body. And these 3 words were given by Ernest Holmes. Another way that we can look at it is the very top one as the seed, the middle one as the soil, and the bottom one as the plant. Now, you'll notice there's a very large V in the center of this, and this is what we call the involution and the evolution. And the downward one that's on the left-hand side is the involution. In other words, intuition and thoughts come from spirit, moving down through us and our soul and into our body for action. And then the right-hand side of that V that goes upward is the evolution, and that is as we evolve from what we've created, like the plant, we move backward and upward, back towards spirit in our spiritual growth. So we can see through all of these a natural growth process. And the concept or ideas that we have come from spirit. And then our mind and our souls can choose to take action, and ultimately the plant begins to grow. Something new is created when the seed which is mentally planted within us takes hold within the soil that we provide. Now, the Bible calls this the parable of the sowers, and to me it isn't about the sower, but rather about the soil and the seed. What actually allows the seeds that are sown to grow? Why, it's the soil, of course. And so how do we prepare the soil for the divine seed? And why is this so important on our journey in life and for our own journey towards our own authenticity? What we mentally do with the spiritual seeds is determined by the nature of our mind and the thoughts that we think. Now, if we go back to that area of the thought about the common ground, for example, it was so hard that no ideas could possibly start within it. The seeds that were planted could not grow. The common ground mind is set in its ways and shut to the development of anything new. This is the pathway that ordinary people would travel, not royalty, not the priests. This was the pathway for the commoners, who were often smothered by stringent beliefs and laws of the religious leaders of that time. Now, the rocky ground is really shallow. It has no depth. Spiritually, it means that our faith in the divine, or even ourselves, is limited and lacking. Stone in biblical symbol is the biblical symbol for spiritual understanding. The everyday, ordinary person back in the time of Jesus was dependent upon the scribes and the Pharisees for spiritual enlightenment. And these individuals were hungry for control and power, and so did not have a great depth of their own spiritual understanding for commoners or to commoners. The thorny ground, the ground with too many seeds, represents the mind that fails to take time to focus. It allows outside forces and thoughts to overtake the needs of intuition or the seeds of intuition. The thorns are also symbols of our false beliefs in life. And the longer that we hang on to those false beliefs, the harder it will be to create something new in our life. The good ground had spiritual depth. It is pliable and can hold the nutrients and moisture so necessary for the growth of the seeds. The mind in the good ground is stimulated by higher thoughts and spiritual growth. What we do with the seeds is determined by the nature of our mind. Do we accept spiritual truth? Do we listen to our intuition, the messages that come from within? Our founder, Ernest Holmes, stated, "The Spirit has placed divine intuition within everyone. This divine intuition is the gateway through which the inspiration of the Almighty enters the mind." The top part of the chart. In Unlocking the Cryptic Parables by Walter Matthews, he indicates that the seed is representative of our spiritual consciousness, and the soil is how we deal with our spiritual experiences. So what does a better understanding of the seed soil plant matter? Why does it matter? Why is it so important that we understand the universal metaphysical concepts taught to us by Ernest Holmes? We all desire to live an authentic life. If we don't take the time to embrace the spiritual seeds in the soil we have mentally prepared, then we will not grow. We will not change. We can only see as far into our world as we can see into ourselves. It is our spiritual task to listen to the seeds of greatness and prepare the soil for the inner growth. Richard Rohr once stated, we do not think ourselves into a new way of living. We live ourselves into a new way of thinking. When we see into ourselves, we begin the process of preparing our mind for newness and spiritual growth. Remember, if you plant a carrot seed, you will get a carrot, not a head of lettuce. You can't demand that a walnut become an almond. So realize that whatever you plant in the soil of your mind is what you will create. Create good things, plant good thoughts. So if you choose to create something new in your life, you must take action to make it happen. In the Hebrew Torah, God is asked for his name, and the reply is, I am becoming. Mark Nepo indicates that becoming can be both a noun and a verb. The noun suggests that God is a process and that the sacred reveals itself in the life of transformation and unfolding. The verb suggests that God is still emerging, not completely defined. That also means that God is as unfinished as you and I are. What the parable implies is that our unfoldment is intimately entwined with God's unfoldment. So if we're all on that journey of unfoldment and becoming, how do we ultimately become the authentic being? How do we make sure that the soil is just right for maximum development of the seed? How do we show up as the magnificent plants that we already are? We can first begin by facing our fears that are getting in the way of our inner development. Some of those fears are based on false beliefs. So often when we begin to explore one inner challenge, we must also be willing to go wherever the subconscious mind and the trail leads us to heal. Next, we must love who we are, as well as who we are becoming. This one can be a tough one for many of us. It is difficult for some of us to accept who we are. It is good to remind yourself that we aren't done learning, growing, changing, becoming until we take our last breath on earth. If this one is a challenge for you, let's take the time each morning and night to acknowledge ourselves in the mirror and state out loud, "I love you," with your name. Let's try that one now without the mirror. Simply state, "I love myself unconditionally."
I love myself unconditionally.
Again.
I love myself unconditionally.
If you had a challenge with that, then it's time to do some inner work around your self-love. Remember, you're preparing the soil to grow your inner power in order to recognize and celebrate the person of your authentic self. To cultivate fertile soil, we need also nurture it with a spiritual practice that deepens our faith. This one can be a tough one, since often we don't see the results that we think we should be getting, and we give up. So remember how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. This is so hard to remember because we become impatient. We want it all, we want it now. And when we don't see the results that we think we should have, we give up. If you don't currently have a practice, start small and make it simple. One of the hardest things for me is meditation. God, I detest it. So I've grown a practice by 1-minute increments that I've added 1 minute at a time. Take a class, read a book, create a daily prayer practice, visit one of our practitioners. Whatever it is that you're willing to do, start with something you're willing to stick with in small increments, 1 bite at a time. Don't forget to be patient with yourself. Don't forget to release what no longer serves you, including not only emotional and mental clearing, but also the physical one. I was searching for something recently and opened up a couple of dresser drawers that I was rummaging through. And of course, what did I discover? Something I hadn't used for years. It promptly went to the giveaway bag. And when we clear away things within us as well as what we have accumulated outside of ourselves, we make room for newness. The soil becomes richer and open to new nutrients. This is an openness to a deeper faith and an expansion of our beliefs. To become a richer soil, we must have the conviction and the belief that we too can act. A close friend of mine is a trained Dakota Sweat Lodge facilitator. Many is the time that I have shared a lodge with her and other women at spiritual retreats. Sweat lodge ceremonies are about more than just sitting there sweating. They are a purification ritual used for a broad range of purposes and depending upon the culture, the occasion, and those that are gathering. The lodge is traditionally made out of simple, sturdy wood limbs and then covered with a natural materials like blankets and cloth tarps. And on the day of the sweat, a large ceremonial fire is built, and large stones called the grandfather stones are put in the fire, and they cook for about 6 hours before the lodge process actually begins. Ultimately, the participants come in, the stones are brought in on a large shovel and placed in the center of the lodge. The door is closed, or the blankets drop down, and you're sitting in complete and total silence, heat, and all alone with your friends and your thoughts. And then water is poured on the stones to create steam, and other herbs might be added, such as sage, to give this on these hot stones, to give even a further smell within there that encourages the healing and the process. Participants pray, we sing, we share stories, and most importantly, we heal something that's an inner challenge. It took Donna several summers to attend the Sundance ceremony back in the Dakotas to be able to become a leader of a sweat lodge. And the last summer that she was there, she wanted to learn some Native American songs and learn them by heart so she could share them with others when she was conducting sweat lodges. And so she went to Stacy, who was one of her teachers, and asked him, and paid him actually, to teach her some of these Native American songs. And as the days passed, Stacy didn't make any effort to come to her, to talk to her, to give her a list, to share anything with her at all. And she was beginning to become concerned. And so finally she went to Stacy and confronted him. I've paid you good money to teach me song, and you've done nothing. And we're almost over here at Sundance. Stacy looked at Donna and shook his head. You're already hearing them. You're just not listening. All the songs you need have been sung repeatedly in all of the ceremonies that we are here with together. It was only then that Donna truly heard the songs and began to listen in a new way. And that is our task. If we want fertile soil for our own spiritual growth, we must listen in a different way so we can hear the voice of God as the seed of our divine expansion occurs. One final thought. I need my last slide up there. This is such a great slide. Can you see it? We cannot force anyone to hear a message they are not ready to receive. But we must never underestimate the power of planting a seed. Hopefully, a new seed has been planted today. This is the truth in my life. This is the truth in yours. And so it is. Amen. Oh, thank you. It's time for special music. Dallas, you want to come back on? I saw you just sneak back in. You lucked out.